I'm Norman, 58 years old, and I've spent the last 29 years running my frozen food distribution business here in Spokane, Washington. What started with one refrigerated truck has grown into a company that supplies grocery chains across 4 states. When that text message arrived during what I thought was a pleasant dinner with my daughter Willow at our usual spot downtown, I had no idea it would save my life and reveal a family conspiracy that had been brewing for months. Get up and go. Don't say anything to her. Those 10 words from an unknown number turned my world upside down, and when I discovered who sent it and why, I realized the daughter I'd been supporting financially was planning something that would have destroyed me completely. The evening started normally enough. Willow had invited me to Clinker Dagger, one of our favorite restaurants overlooking the Spokane River, where we'd been having father-daughter dinners since she was in high school. She seemed unusually cheerful, almost giddy, talking about her new apartment that I'd been helping her afford, and her boyfriend Jace's new job prospects. I'd been covering her rent for 8 months now, plus her car payment and insurance, because she claimed she was struggling to find steady work after college. As a father who built his distribution business from nothing into a multi-million-dollar operation, I believed in helping family get on their feet. We were halfway through our steaks when my phone buzzed. The text came from a number I didn't recognize. Get up and go. Don't say anything to her. Check your banking app, now. My blood ran cold. Willow was mid-sentence, laughing about some story from her yoga class, completely oblivious to the message that had just shattered my sense of security. I kept my expression neutral, years of business negotiations having taught me to hide my reactions, but my mind was racing. Who would send such a message? Why during dinner with my own daughter? What could possibly be so urgent that someone felt the need to warn me anonymously? I excused myself to use the restroom, my hands shaking slightly as I opened my banking app. What I saw made my stomach drop. 3 unauthorized transfers had been initiated from my business account in the last 2 hours, totaling over $47,000. The transfers were scheduled to complete within the next 30 minutes. Someone with access to my financial information was systematically draining my accounts while I sat here having dinner, completely unaware. But here's what terrified me most. The timing was too perfect. The transfers had started exactly when I'd arrived at the restaurant. Someone knew exactly where I was, exactly when I'd be distracted, and exactly how long they'd have to move my money before I'd notice. This wasn't a random hack or identity theft. This was an inside job, planned by someone who knew my routines, my passwords, my security questions. I returned to the table, my mind spinning with possibilities. Willow was still talking animatedly, but now every word felt different. Her cheerful demeanor that had seemed so genuine moments before now felt forced, calculated. Was she keeping me here deliberately? Was she part of whatever was happening to my accounts? The second text arrived as I sat back down. She's stalling. Leave now. Go straight to your bank. Don't let her follow you. For the past 8 months, I thought I'd been living the American dream as a successful business owner who could afford to help his struggling daughter. My frozen food distribution company was thriving, with contracts spanning from Seattle to Denver, and I'd built a comfortable life here in our neighborhood near downtown Spokane. The 3-bedroom house was paid off, my 401k was solid, and I had enough in savings to help Willow transition into independence without feeling the pinch. That's what I told myself every time I transferred money into her checking account or paid another one of her bills. Willow had moved back to Spokane after college, claiming she needed time to figure out her career path. As a father who'd worked his way up from driving a single refrigerated truck to owning a fleet of 30 vehicles, I understood the struggle of getting started. I'd been covering her rent on a nice apartment across town, her car payment on a Honda Civic, her health insurance, even her grocery bills when she claimed money was tight. We're talking about $2,800 a month, easy. But for a guy who'd built his business into a 7-figure operation, it felt like the right thing to do. Our weekly dinners had become a tradition I looked forward to. Willow would update me on her job interviews, her yoga classes, her social life with friends from college. She'd always been my pride and joy. The daughter who got good grades, stayed out of trouble, and seemed to have her head on straight. When her mother and I divorced 6 years ago, Willow chose to stay close to me, which meant everything. I thought we had the kind of father-daughter relationship most men would envy. She'd been living with her boyfriend Jace for about 4 months, a guy she'd met through mutual friends who seemed decent enough when I met him. He was polite, talked about wanting to get into construction management, and appeared to genuinely care about Willow. I'd even helped them move some furniture when they decided to get the larger apartment, thinking it was a sign they were getting serious about building a life together. Looking back now, I realize how naive I'd been about their true intentions. The routine was always the same. Willow would text me on Sunday afternoons, suggesting dinner during the week. We'd meet at one of our regular spots, I'd pay the check, and she'd give me updates on her expenses for the month. If she needed help with rent or car insurance, she'd mention it casually, and I'd transfer the money the next day without question. It never occurred to me to ask for proof of these expenses or to wonder why someone with a college degree couldn't find even part-time work in a city like Spokane. But sitting there in that restaurant, staring at my phone screen showing unauthorized transfers of my own money, everything about our recent dinners started taking on a different meaning. Her unusual cheerfulness tonight, the way she'd insisted on this particular restaurant at this particular time, how she'd been checking her own phone more frequently than usual, almost like she was waiting for updates about something. The realization hit me like a freight train. Willow hadn't invited me to dinner because she wanted to spend time with her father. She'd invited me here to keep me distracted while someone drained my business accounts. The third text message arrived as I was processing this devastating possibility. Your business partner called the bank. They're trying to stop the transfers. Get there now before it's too late. I looked across the table at Willow, who was now checking her phone for the third time in 5 minutes, and something in her expression made my blood freeze. She wasn't just distracted, she was nervous. Really nervous. The kind of nervous you get when you're waiting for confirmation that something important has gone according to plan. When she looked up and caught me staring, she forced that bright smile again and said, "Dad, you seem distracted tonight. Everything okay with the business?" That question hit me like a punch to the gut. Why would she ask about the business specifically? I'd never mentioned having any problems, and our conversation tonight had been focused on her life, not mine. But now, with those text messages burning in my mind and unauthorized transfers draining my accounts, her innocent question felt like a probe. Was she fishing to see if I'd discovered what was happening? Was she checking to make sure I was still in the dark? "Business is fine, sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice steady while my mind raced. "Just thinking about a delivery schedule for tomorrow." The lie came easily, but inside I was falling apart. How long had she been playing me? How long had our weekly dinners been nothing more than carefully orchestrated distractions while someone systematically stole from me? My phone buzzed again. The fourth message was more urgent. She just texted someone, "Whatever you do, don't go home tonight. They know you received warnings. Get to the bank, then somewhere safe." The pieces were falling into place in the most horrifying way possible. Willow had been texting someone throughout dinner, but I'd assumed it was just typical social media behavior. Now I realized she was probably coordinating with whoever was moving my money, letting them know I was still at the restaurant, still distracted, still completely unaware of what they were doing to my life's work. I excused myself again, this time calling my business partner Mike from the parking lot. He answered on the first ring, and his voice was tight with panic. "Norman, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for an hour. Someone's been moving money out of our accounts, big amounts. I called the bank, but we need both signatures to stop the transfers. Where the hell are you?" "I'm at dinner with Willow," I said, and even as the words left my mouth, I heard how stupid they sounded. "Mike, how is this possible? Who has access to move that kind of money?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out," he said. "But whoever it is knows our procedures, our account numbers, even our security protocols. This isn't some random hacker, Norman. This is someone who's been studying our operation from the inside, someone who knows exactly how our business works." The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. Over the past 8 months, I'd been sharing everything with Willow. Every business success, every new contract, every financial milestone. She knew I'd landed the big Albertsons distribution deal. She knew about the expansion into Colorado. She even knew I kept business records in my home office because she'd helped me organize paperwork when I complained about being disorganized. I'd trusted her with information that someone could use to understand exactly how much money moved through my accounts and when. But here's what made it even worse. She'd specifically asked about my banking setup 3 weeks ago, claiming she was thinking about switching from her credit union to my bank for better business services when she finally found steady work. I'd walked her through the online banking system. showed her how business transfers worked, even mentioned the security protocols we used for large transactions. I thought I was being a helpful father preparing his daughter for financial independence. Instead, I'd been giving her a blueprint for robbing me blind. When I returned to the table, Willow was visibly agitated. "Dad, we should probably call it a night. I'm not feeling well suddenly," she said, already reaching for her purse. "Rain check on dessert?" "Actually, I'm feeling great," I said, settling back into my chair with a smile that probably looked as fake as it felt. "Let's get that dessert. I've been looking forward to their chocolate cake all week." The last thing I was going to do was let Willow control the timeline of this evening, especially when it was becoming clear that someone was counting on me leaving at a specific time. Willow's face went pale. "Dad, I really think we should go. I have an early morning tomorrow and you know how I get when I don't get enough sleep." She was practically squirming in her seat now, checking her phone every 30 seconds. Whatever was supposed to happen next in their plan clearly required me to be somewhere else, and fast. I flagged down our waitress and ordered coffee and 2 slices of cake, ignoring Willow's increasingly panicked expressions. While we waited, I started asking questions I'd never bothered to ask before. "So tell me about these job interviews you've been going on. What companies? What positions?" For the first time in months, Willow stumbled over her answers. The marketing position at a local firm that she'd mentioned last week suddenly became a social media role at a startup. The interview she'd had on Tuesday was now scheduled for next Tuesday. Details that should have been crystal clear to someone actually looking for work kept shifting and changing. How had I never noticed these inconsistencies before? My phone kept buzzing with updates from the anonymous number. Each message painted a clearer picture of just how deep this betrayal went. Bank called police. Transfers originated from IP address registered to apartment complex on Riverside Drive. That was Willow's address. Security footage shows male matching boyfriend's description at ATM using business debit card. That had to be Jace. "They've been planning this for months. Check your home security system." I nearly choked on my coffee at that last message. I had installed a security system 6 months ago after a string of break-ins in our neighborhood, but I'd given Willow the code because she occasionally stopped by to check on things when I was traveling for business. If someone had been in my house, accessing my files, copying documents, or worse, they could have done it with complete impunity using information I'd freely provided. Using my banking app discreetly under the table, I started checking my other accounts. My personal savings had been untouched, but someone had applied for a credit line against my business using forged documentation. The application had been submitted 2 weeks ago, right after I'd told Willow about landing the new contract with Safeway that would increase our monthly revenue by 40%. The timing wasn't coincidental. "Willow," I said carefully, "remind me, when did you say Jace started that new construction job?" I never paid much attention to her boyfriend's employment situation, but now every detail mattered. About 3 weeks ago? Maybe 4? She said, not meeting my eyes. "He's been really busy with training and orientation." But that didn't make sense either. 3 weeks ago, she'd told me Jace was still looking for work, which is why I'd offered to help with groceries. If he'd been employed for weeks, why was I still covering their living expenses? Why hadn't she mentioned this supposed job until tonight? My phone buzzed with another message. "Police are en route to your house. Someone triggered your silent alarm 20 minutes ago. Don't go home tonight." The dessert arrived, but I could barely taste it. Everything I thought I knew about my daughter's life was unraveling in real time. The apartment I'd been paying for wasn't a temporary stepping stone to independence. It was a base of operations for robbing me. The boyfriend I'd welcomed into our family wasn't trying to build a career. He was building a criminal enterprise using my own money to fund it. And Willow, the daughter I'd trusted with every detail of my business and personal life, had been feeding information to people who wanted to destroy everything I'd worked 30 years to build. "Dad, please, can we go now?" Willow's voice was getting desperate. "I really don't feel well." "You know what, sweetheart? I'm not feeling so great either," I said, finally standing up from the table. But instead of heading toward the exit with Willow, I turned toward the restaurant's back hallway, where I knew there was a secondary exit that led to the employee parking area. "I'm just going to splash some cold water on my face real quick. Meet me by the car?" Willow looked confused but nodded, clearly relieved that we were finally leaving. As soon as she headed toward the front entrance, I slipped out the back exit and called my attorney from the alley behind the restaurant. David Henderson had been handling my business legal matters for over a decade, and if anyone could help me understand what was happening, it was him. "Norman, I was just about to call you," David said before I could even explain why I was calling. "I got a strange call from someone claiming to be your assistant about an hour ago, asking about power of attorney documents and emergency financial transfers. I told them you don't have an assistant and that I'd need to speak with you directly before discussing any legal matters. When I tried to call you back, it went straight to voicemail." My heart was pounding so hard I could barely speak. "David, I never called you. I don't have an assistant. Someone has been draining my business accounts while I've been at dinner, and I think my own daughter might be involved." Even saying the words out loud felt surreal, like I was describing someone else's nightmare instead of my own life. "Jesus, Norman, how much are we talking about?" David's voice was grave. "Over 47,000 so far, but I think it's just the beginning. Someone has inside information about my business operations, my banking procedures, even my personal routines. They knew exactly when I'd be distracted and for how long." I was pacing in the alley now, my mind racing through all the possibilities I hadn't wanted to consider. "David, what if they're going after everything? What if this is just the start?" "We need to get you to the bank immediately," David said. "I'm calling their fraud department now. Don't go home tonight, and whatever you do, don't let anyone know where you're staying. If your daughter is involved, she might be feeding information to whoever is behind this." As I hung up with David, another text arrived from the anonymous number. "Checked county records. Someone filed preliminary paperwork to contest your will last week. Check your email for photos of documents they don't know you have copies of." I opened my email with shaking hands. The photos showed legal documents I'd never seen before, filled out in handwriting that looked suspiciously like Willow's. Someone had been researching the process for having me declared mentally incompetent, with the goal of gaining control over my assets. The paperwork was incomplete, but it was detailed enough to show they'd done serious research into how to strip away my legal rights to my own property and business. But here's what made my blood run cold. The documents referenced medical concerns and behavioral changes that someone would need intimate knowledge of my life to fabricate convincingly. They mentioned my occasional forgetfulness about small details, my tendency to work late and skip meals, even my recent decision to install a security system because I'd been feeling more anxious about break-ins. Someone had been studying my habits and personality traits to build a case for taking away my competency. The next photo showed bank statements from accounts I'd never opened, but they were in my name and contained deposits that exactly matched the amounts I'd been giving Willow over the past 8 months. Every dollar I'd transferred to help with her rent, her car payment, her living expenses had been immediately transferred to these secret accounts. She hadn't been struggling financially at all. She'd been systematically collecting money from me under false pretenses and hiding it away. But the final photo was the one that destroyed me completely. It was a text message thread between Willow and someone listed in her phone as Jay, discussing timeline details for what they called the final phase. The messages were cold and calculated, discussing my business travel schedule, my banking habits, even my emotional vulnerabilities after the divorce. They talked about me like I was a mark, a target, someone whose trust and love could be weaponized for their financial gain. One message from Willow read, "Dad's been asking more questions about the job interviews. We need to move faster. He's not as dumb as we thought." Jace's response was chilling. "Don't worry, after tonight it won't matter what he suspects. By morning, we'll have enough to disappear, and he'll be dealing with legal problems that will keep him busy for months." I stood in that alley, reading evidence of my own daughter's betrayal, and felt something inside me break and then immediately harden. The naive father who'd trusted blindly was gone. In his place was a businessman who'd spent 3 decades learning how to outmaneuver people who underestimated him. They thought they were dealing with an aging, lonely father who'd do anything to maintain a relationship with his daughter. They had no idea they'd just declared war on someone who'd built an empire from nothing and had both the resources and the connections to fight back. I was still standing in the alley behind Clinkerdagger, staring at the photos of legal documents that would have destroyed my life, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my home security company. My hands were shaking as I answered. "Mr. Patterson, this is Amanda from Secure Home Monitoring. We've detected motion in your home office at 8:47 p.m., followed by your silent alarm being triggered at 8:52. Our attempts to reach your home phone have been unsuccessful. Should we dispatch police to your residence? Yes, I said immediately. Send them now. I'm not at home, and no one should be in my house. As I spoke those words, everything crystallized with terrifying clarity. While I'd been sitting in that restaurant, someone had broken into my home. The timing wasn't coincidental. They'd waited until they were certain I was safely distracted at dinner before making their move. Sir, I should also mention that someone called our customer service line about 20 minutes ago, claiming to be you, trying to disable the alarm system remotely. When they couldn't provide the correct security answers, we flagged the account and increased monitoring. That's how we caught the motion so quickly. The pieces clicked into place like a lock opening. Jace must have been inside my house, probably copying files, accessing my computer, maybe even installing software to monitor my accounts remotely. When the alarm went off, they'd tried to disable it using information they thought they had about my security setup. But here's what they didn't know. After the divorce, I'd changed all my security questions to answers that only I would know. Not even Willow knew the new information. Another text from my anonymous guardian angel arrived. Your daughter just got a call. She's heading to parking lot now. Whatever you do, don't let her see you. Follow her, but stay back. This is when you'll learn the truth about who's really behind this. I crept around to the front of the building and spotted Willow near my car, but she wasn't alone. Jace was there, along with two other men I'd never seen before. They were having an intense, hushed conversation, and even from a distance, I could see that Willow was agitated, gesturing frantically with her hands. This wasn't a casual meeting between young adults. This was a criminal conspiracy in crisis mode. I positioned myself behind a large SUV where I could hear their conversation without being seen. What I heard made my blood freeze. The old man got suspicious, Willow was saying. He started asking questions about the job interviews, and he wouldn't leave the restaurant. Something spooked him. Did he check his phone? Did he get any calls? One of the strangers asked. Yeah, he kept going to the bathroom and checking his phone. Someone might have tipped him off, Willow replied. Jace, what happened at the house? Did you get everything we need? The alarm went off before I could finish, Jace said. I got his computer files and some bank documents, but I had to get out when the security system started calling. The cops are probably there by now. This is exactly what we didn't want to happen, the second stranger said. If he's on to us, he could freeze the accounts before we finish the transfers. Then Willow said something that felt like a knife through my heart. Look, worst case scenario, we stick to the original plan. We have enough to make the mental competency case stick if we have to. I've been documenting his behavior for months. The forgetfulness, the paranoia about security, the way he's been obsessing over the business. Any judge would believe he's losing it. The first stranger nodded. And if that doesn't work, we've got the medical angle. Those sleeping pills we've been putting in his coffee during your dinners should show up in blood work if it comes to that. I nearly gasped out loud. They'd been drugging me. For months, they'd been slipping something into my food or drinks during our weekly dinners, which explained why I'd been feeling foggy and tired after eating with Willow. I'd attributed it to working too hard and getting older, never imagining that my own daughter was systematically poisoning me to build a case for my mental incompetence. He trusts me completely, Willow continued. Even if he suspects something tonight, he won't want to believe his own daughter would do this to him. That's his weakness, and it's what's going to destroy him. But as I stood there, listening to my daughter discuss my destruction with the cold calculation of a seasoned criminal, something unexpected happened. Instead of devastation, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The loving father, who would have done anything to protect his relationship with his daughter, was gone. In his place was a businessman who recognized a hostile takeover attempt when he saw one. They thought they were dealing with a trusting, aging father whose love for his daughter made him vulnerable. They had no idea they'd just revealed their entire operation to someone who'd spent 30 years outmaneuvering competitors who underestimated him. They'd made one critical mistake. They'd assumed that my love for Willow would blind me to reality forever. I pulled out my phone and started recording their conversation. Every word, every detail of their plan, every admission of guilt was being captured in crystal clear audio. When Jace started describing the software he'd installed on my computer to monitor my accounts, I got it all. When Willow detailed how she'd been researching guardianship laws to gain control of my assets, I recorded every word. That anonymous text had been right. This was the moment I learned the truth about who my daughter really was. And now it was time to show her who her father really was when someone threatened everything he'd built. I stayed hidden behind that SUV for another 15 minutes, recording everything as their conversation revealed the full scope of what they'd been planning. What I heard made me realize this wasn't just financial theft. It was a complete identity takeover that had been in the works for almost a year. "We need to accelerate everything," the first stranger, who seemed to be the leader, was saying. "Marcus, how long before the power of attorney documents are ready to file?" Marcus, the second stranger, pulled out a folder from his car. "I can have them ready by tomorrow morning. We've got his signature from the Christmas card he signed for Willow last year. The handwriting analysis software I've been using makes it almost impossible to detect forgeries. Once these are filed, she'll have legal authority to make all his financial decisions." Jace was pacing now, clearly nervous about the alarm at my house. What if the cops found evidence? What if they're investigating this as more than just a break-in? "Relax," Willow said, and her cold, calculating tone was like nothing I'd ever heard from her before. "I've been setting up the mental competency angle for months. If anyone starts asking questions, we flip the script. Dad's been acting erratically, forgetting things, making poor business decisions. We're concerned family members trying to protect him from himself." The leader nodded approvingly. The beauty of this plan is that his own love for his daughter is what's been making it work. Every time he transfers money to help her, every time he shares business information, every time he trusts her with personal details, he's giving us more ammunition to use against him. But then Marcus said something that made my blood run cold. "What about the life insurance? Once we have power of attorney, we can increase his coverage and change the beneficiaries. With his recent stress levels and the medication we've been giving him, plus his age, it wouldn't be suspicious if something happened to him in the next few months." I stopped breathing. They weren't just planning to steal my money and assets. They were talking about killing me. The sleeping pills, the stress, the systematic destruction of my mental health, it was all building toward making my death look natural and inevitable. Willow's response was the most chilling thing I'd ever heard. "Let's focus on the financial stuff first. But yeah, eventually that might be necessary. He's not going to just disappear quietly once he figures out what's happening. And we can't have him around to contest anything in court." I had to grip the side of the SUV to keep from falling over. My own daughter, the little girl I'd taught to ride a bike, the teenager I'd supported through high school drama, the young woman I'd been so proud to help launch into adulthood, was casually discussing my murder like it was a business decision. The anonymous texts kept coming with crucial information. "Police found surveillance equipment in your home office. Someone's been monitoring your computer activity for weeks. Also found modified prescription bottles in your kitchen cabinet. Get to hospital for blood work immediately." Another message followed. "Bank security footage shows your daughter using duplicate key to access your safe deposit box last Tuesday. She's been there 4 times in the past month." The safe deposit box revelation hit me like a freight train. That box contained copies of my will, business partnership agreements, insurance policies, and the deed to a small cabin in Idaho that I'd inherited from my father, but never mentioned to anyone except my attorney. If Willow had been accessing it, she'd seen everything. She knew exactly what I owned, exactly how it was all structured legally, and exactly what she'd need to do to get control of it all. But here's what they didn't know. I'd been recording everything for the past 20 minutes, and I had connections they couldn't imagine. 30 years in the frozen food distribution business had put me in contact with people from every level of society. I knew attorneys, judges, law enforcement officers, private investigators, and business owners who owed me favors. They thought they were dealing with an isolated, trusting father. They had no idea they just revealed their entire criminal conspiracy to someone with the resources and connections to destroy them all. I also realized who had been sending me the anonymous warnings. During their conversation, Marcus had mentioned a 4th member of their group who'd gotten cold feet about the violence and wanted out. Someone with inside knowledge of their plan had grown a conscience and was trying to save my life. They were probably watching from somewhere nearby, making sure I heard everything I needed to hear. As their meeting broke up, I heard Willow say, "I'll keep Dad distracted and confused for as long as possible. The medication should keep him foggy enough that he won't piece things together too quickly. Just make sure everything's ready to file by Friday. Once we have legal control, we can move fast." Friday was 3 days away. I had 72 hours to dismantle a conspiracy that had taken them months to build. But they'd made one critical error. They'd underestimated what a father could do when he finally understood that his child wasn't worth saving. As they separated and got into their cars, I made my way back to my truck, my mind already working through my next moves. The naive, trusting father was gone forever. What they were about to face was a businessman who'd built an empire through determination and strategic thinking, who had resources they couldn't imagine, and who now had nothing left to lose. I followed them from a distance as they drove to what I assumed was their real headquarters. Not the apartment I'd been paying for, but a rundown house on the outskirts of Spokane that looked like it had been abandoned for years. As I watched them disappear inside, another anonymous text arrived. "This is Detective Sarah Chen, SPD. I've been investigating this group for weeks. They've done this to 3 other families. Your daughter isn't the mastermind. She's being used too. The real leader is Marcus Webb, career con artist. Meet me at Denny's on Division in 1 hour. Come alone." Everything suddenly made a horrible kind of sense. Willow wasn't some criminal genius who'd suddenly turned evil. She'd been recruited, manipulated, probably threatened into participating in something much bigger than either of us had realized. But even as I tried to process this possibility, I couldn't forget what I'd recorded. Whatever had led her into this situation, she'd still discussed my murder with the casual indifference of someone ordering coffee. I drove to the Denny's and found Detective Chen waiting in a back booth. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much. She slid a thick folder across the table as I sat down. "Mr. Patterson, I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but your daughter got involved with Marcus Webb about 10 months ago. He targets families with older, successful fathers and young adult children who feel entitled or resentful. He identifies the psychological pressure points and exploits them until the children become willing participants in elaborate theft schemes." I opened the folder and saw photos of Marcus with other families, police reports, financial records showing similar patterns of systematic theft and identity manipulation. "How many families?" I asked. "Yours is the 4th we know about. The other 3 lost everything: their businesses, their homes, their savings. 2 of the fathers ended up in psychiatric facilities after Webb's team successfully argued they were mentally incompetent. 1 died under suspicious circumstances after increasing his life insurance coverage." The photos showed men who looked like me, successful, older, probably devoted fathers who'd trusted the wrong people. I recognized the expression on their faces in the before photos, that same proud, generous look I'd worn when talking about helping Willow get established. In the after photos, if there were any, they looked broken, defeated, destroyed by people they'd loved. "Detective, I recorded their entire conversation tonight. They're planning to file forged power of attorney documents tomorrow, and they've been poisoning me for months to build a case for mental incompetency. But I also heard them discussing my murder." I handed her my phone with the recording. As Detective Chen listened to the audio, her expression grew grimmer. "This is exactly the pattern we've been tracking, but this is the first time we've caught them discussing violence so explicitly. Mr. Patterson, you need to understand something important. Your daughter is in serious danger too. Once they get control of your assets, they typically eliminate anyone who could expose them later. That includes the family members they've been using." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Even as part of me still felt betrayed and furious with Willow, another part of me recognized the daughter I'd raised in what Detective Chen was describing. "She's been manipulated too," I said, though the words felt strange after everything I'd heard. "Webb is a master manipulator. He finds young adults who feel overshadowed by successful parents, feeds their resentment, makes them feel like they deserve more than they're getting. Then he slowly introduces the idea that their parents are obstacles to their happiness. By the time they realize how deep they're in, they're facing serious criminal charges if they don't cooperate fully." Another text arrived from my anonymous contact. "They're moving faster than expected. Jace just left the house with suitcases. They're planning to run tonight. If you're going to save your daughter, it has to be now." Detective Chen saw the text and immediately called for backup. "We've been waiting for enough evidence to arrest the entire network. Thanks to your recording, we have that now. But if they're running tonight, we need to move immediately." "What about Willow?" I asked. "What happens to her?" "That depends on how cooperative she is and whether she's willing to testify against Webb. Given what you've recorded, she's clearly involved, but if she's been coerced or threatened, that changes everything legally." As we drove toward the abandoned house with police backup following at a distance, I realized this was the moment that would determine not just the outcome of this nightmare, but whether I could salvage any kind of relationship with my daughter. I'd heard her discuss my death, but I'd also learned she might be as much a victim as I was. When we arrived at the house, we could see frantic activity inside. Through the windows, I watched Marcus directing Jace and the other man as they packed boxes and loaded computers into vehicles. Willow was standing apart from the group, and even from a distance, I could see she was crying. Detective Chen gave the signal, and suddenly the house was surrounded by police officers with weapons drawn. "This is Spokane Police. The building is surrounded. Exit with your hands visible." The chaos that followed revealed everything I needed to know about who my daughter really was. When Marcus grabbed Willow and started using her as a human shield, shouting that he'd kill her if anyone came closer, I saw pure terror in her eyes. This wasn't the calculated criminal I'd heard discussing my murder. This was a frightened young woman who'd gotten in way over her head and was now facing the consequences of trusting the wrong people. The standoff lasted 23 minutes, but it felt like hours. Marcus Webb held my daughter against him with what looked like a knife pressed to her throat, screaming demands for safe passage while police negotiators tried to talk him down. From my position behind the police barricade, I could see Willow's face clearly, and what I saw there wasn't the cold calculation I'd heard in her voice earlier. It was pure terror, and when her eyes met mine across the chaos, something that looked like shame so deep it was physically painful to witness. "Dad!" she screamed when she saw me. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. He said he'd kill me if I didn't help. He said he'd hurt you too." Marcus pressed the blade closer to her neck. "Shut up, Willow. You're in this as deep as anyone else. You took his money, you drugged his food, you gave us access to everything we needed." But Detective Chen was right beside me, listening carefully to every word. "That's coercion," she said quietly. "Death threats, threats of violence against family members. If she can prove he was threatening her, that changes her legal situation completely." The breakthrough came when Jace, apparently realizing that Marcus was willing to sacrifice all of them to save himself, started shouting from inside the house. "Let her go, Marcus. She never wanted to hurt her father. You forced her into this. You showed her those photos of what you'd do to him if she didn't cooperate." "Photos of what?" Detective Chen called through a bullhorn. "Photos of the other fathers," Jace yelled back. "Marcus showed her what happened to the man in Tacoma, the one who had an accident when he wouldn't sign over his business. Willow's been terrified for months that he'd kill her dad if she didn't go along with everything." That's when the full picture became clear. The cold, calculating tone I'd heard from Willow wasn't the voice of a willing criminal. It was the voice of someone trying to sound convincing enough to keep a dangerous man from carrying out his threats. She'd been performing for Marcus, playing the role of the ruthless daughter to protect both of us from someone who'd already committed murder. When the SWAT team finally moved in, it happened quickly. Marcus pushed Willow away and tried to run, but he was tackled before he made it 10 feet. As the paramedics checked Willow for injuries, she kept looking at me with an expression of such profound shame and fear that all my anger evaporated. This was still my daughter, the little girl who used to cry when she accidentally stepped on insects because she didn't want to hurt anything. At the police station, the full scope of Marcus Webb's operation became clear. He'd been running variations of this scheme for over 5 years, targeting successful older men with adult children who felt disconnected from their parents' wealth and success. His method was always the same: identify the emotional vulnerabilities, exploit family dynamics, then gradually escalate the criminal activity while using threats of violence to ensure compliance. "Your daughter provided crucial evidence tonight," Detective Chen told me while Willow gave her statement in another room. "She'd been secretly recording Marcus's threats for weeks, hoping to find a way to protect you without putting you in more danger. She's the one who's been sending you those anonymous warnings." I stared at her in shock. Willow was my anonymous contact? She's been trying to save your life while being threatened with death herself. Marcus told her that if she didn't help drain your accounts, he'd make your death look like a heart attack, just like he did with Robert Morrison in Tacoma last year. She was trapped between protecting you and trying to keep you alive. The evidence Willow had collected was extensive: recordings of Marcus describing his previous murders, photos of weapons he'd threatened to use, detailed records of how he'd manipulated the other families. She'd been building a case against him while pretending to be his willing accomplice, risking her own life to gather enough evidence to destroy him. When I was finally allowed to see her, Willow broke down completely. "Dad, I tried to find another way. I tried to warn you without him knowing. I thought if I could just get enough evidence, if I could prove what he'd done to those other families, maybe the police could stop him before he hurt you." "Why didn't you just come to me?" I asked, though I thought I already knew the answer. "Because he showed me crime scene photos from Tacoma and Seattle. He showed me what happened to fathers who didn't cooperate. He said if I involved you or the police before he was ready to disappear, he'd kill you and make it look natural. I thought I could handle it myself, gather enough evidence to put him away forever." The final piece of the puzzle came when police searched Marcus's other properties. They found detailed files on dozens of potential targets, including psychological profiles, financial records, and family relationship assessments. My file was over 2 inches thick and included photos of me taken without my knowledge, recordings of conversations between Willow and me, and a complete analysis of my emotional vulnerabilities following my divorce. Marcus Webb was charged with 3 counts of murder, multiple counts of fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. Jace and the other accomplice were charged as accessories, but cooperated fully in exchange for lighter sentences. They revealed that Marcus had been threatening to kill all of them if they didn't complete the operation successfully. As for Willow, the district attorney agreed that she'd been operating under duress and that her cooperation had been essential in stopping a serial killer who'd been operating for years. She was sentenced to 2 years of probation and community service, but most importantly, she was alive and safe. The money they'd stolen was recovered, my business accounts were secured, and the forged documents were destroyed. But the real victory was understanding that my daughter had never stopped being the person I'd raised her to be. She'd risked everything to protect me, even when it meant appearing to betray me. 6 months later, Willow and I were having dinner again, but this time it was at my kitchen table in my house here in Spokane. She'd moved back in temporarily while she rebuilt her life and went through the intensive therapy that Detective Chen had recommended for victims of long-term psychological manipulation. The difference in her was remarkable. The haunted, desperate look in her eyes had been replaced by something that looked like peace, maybe for the first time in over a year. "I keep thinking about that text I sent you that night," she said, helping herself to more of the lasagna I'd made. "Get up and go. Don't say anything to her." I was so terrified that Marcus would realize I was trying to warn you that I couldn't even identify myself. I thought if I could just get you away from the restaurant, maybe I could figure out how to stop everything without getting us both killed. The full story had emerged gradually through therapy sessions and police interviews. Marcus had recruited Willow through Jace, who'd been working for him for over 2 years. They'd identified me as a target because of my successful business, my recent divorce that had left me emotionally vulnerable, and my obvious devotion to my daughter. Marcus had spent months studying our relationship, learning exactly how to manipulate both of us. He was a master at making people feel like they had no choice, Dr. Sarah Martinez, Willow's therapist, had explained during one of our joint sessions. He'd show potential recruits evidence of what happened to people who crossed him, then offer them a way to protect their loved ones by cooperating. It's a classic coercive control technique that leaves victims feeling responsible for crimes they were forced to participate in. The sleeping medication they'd been putting in my coffee during our dinners was real, but Willow had been diluting it as much as she dared without Marcus noticing. The forgetfulness and confusion I'd experienced was intentional on their part, but she'd been trying to minimize the damage while appearing to comply. Every piece of information she'd given them about my business had been carefully calculated to delay their timeline and give her more time to gather evidence. "The hardest part was pretending I didn't care about you," she told me one evening. "Marcus would test me constantly, making me say horrible things about you to prove I was really on his side. Every time I had to act like I hated you, it felt like I was killing a part of myself." My frozen food distribution business had not only survived the ordeal, but had actually grown stronger. Word had gotten out in our industry about how I'd handled the situation, and several competitors had reached out with partnership opportunities. There's apparently something to be said for being known as a guy who doesn't give up easily and who protects what's important to him. The cabin in Idaho that Willow had discovered in my safe deposit box became a retreat for both of us. We'd drive up there on weekends, sometimes talking through what had happened, sometimes just enjoying the silence and the fact that we'd both survived something that could have destroyed us permanently. She'd started calling it our healing place, and I'd started calling it home away from home. Detective Chen had become something of a family friend. The case against Marcus Webb had made her career, and she'd been promoted to head a new task force focused on identifying and stopping family manipulation schemes. "What your daughter did was incredibly brave," she'd told me during the trial. "Most victims of coercive control don't find ways to fight back while protecting their loved ones. She saved your life and probably prevented Marcus from targeting other families." But the most important change was in how Willow and I communicated now. The crisis had forced us to be completely honest with each other in ways we'd never been before. She told me about feeling overshadowed by my business success, about worrying that she'd never be able to build something as impressive as what I'd created. I told her about my fears after the divorce, that I was too focused on work, that maybe I wasn't the father she needed. "Dad, you know what I realized during all of this?" she said one night as we sat on the porch of the Idaho cabin, watching the sun set over the mountains. "When Marcus was threatening to kill you, I understood that nothing else mattered. Not money, not success, not proving myself independently. Nothing was more important than keeping you safe. That's when I knew I had to find a way to fight back, no matter what it cost me." The text message that had started this whole nightmare, "Get up and go, don't say anything to her," was now printed and framed on my office wall. Not because I wanted to remember the worst night of my life, but because I wanted to remember what my daughter was willing to risk to save me. When people ask about it, I tell them it's a reminder that the people who love you will find ways to protect you, even when the odds seem impossible. Willow started her own small business last month, a consulting firm that helps other families who've been victims of financial manipulation schemes. Detective Chen refers clients to her, and she's already helped 3 families recover stolen assets and rebuild their relationships. She's found her calling in turning her worst experience into something that helps other people, and I've never been more proud of her. The anonymous warning text that changed everything turned out to be the beginning of a deeper understanding between my daughter and me. Sometimes the worst crises reveal who people really are when everything else is stripped away. In our case, it revealed that the love we'd built over 28 years was stronger than fear, stronger than manipulation, and strong enough to survive almost losing each other completely. If you're watching this and thinking about your own family relationships, remember this: the people who love you will move heaven and earth to protect you, even if you can't see it happening. Trust is precious, but it's also resilient, and sometimes the scariest moments in life are actually the ones that show you how much you're truly valued by the people who matter most.